Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are on a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Arn. And of course, we couldn't do it without the master of ceremonies, the founder of the Four Horsemen, the enforcer himself, AA, Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you, man?
I'm doing fine. Much wishes for everybody out there that they're staying healthy and safe, and hope everybody is doing all the right things. I know I update it and harp on it all the time, but come on, folks, wear the mask, do the distancing, do all the right things, get vaccinated as soon as you possibly can. Let's get around this corner.
Today's episode of Arn is all about Fastlane 2016. Went down on February 21st, 2016 at the Quicken Loans Arena right there in Cleveland, Ohio. Big crowd, a near legitimate sellout here, 14,446 fans there. It's the second ever Fastlane event. This is the final Fastlane before the company attempts another brand split. It's going to turn into a Raw pay-per-view the following year. The poster of the show features our main event, Dean Ambrose, Roman Reigns, and Brock Lesnar. And they're all waving the checkered flag in front of Eva Marie. Fastlane, I guess in naming this, we're trying to set the tone. We're on the fast lane to WrestleMania. After Royal Rumble, everybody's ready for WrestleMania season, right, Arn?
Yeah, and that's exactly what they're admitting. I think, if you think about it, there wasn't much time between the Rumble and WrestleMania.
Right.
Probably not enough. It always felt like after the Rumble, WrestleMania was, main event was set. You were pretty much now in a position where, okay, we got our main event. Now let's start filling in the blanks around it. But when you had to immediately build to Fastlane, as soon as Fastlane was over, then you had a rushed build to WrestleMania. I just felt like that was one pay-per-view that was just jammed in there that we could have done without.
Let's mention too, this is the worst buy rate in pay-per-view history. But of course that's because everything's on the WWE network. We had 43,000 traditional pay-per-view buys. 18,000 of those are domestic, 25,000 are international. But most everybody listening to this probably watched on the WWE network. One of the biggest stories around this time, though, was an incident on Raw that included the Daniel Bryan retirement. As Vince McMahon was walking to the back, Titus O'Neil playfully grabbed him by the arm, as if to say ladies first. Vince shoves him, which was seen on camera, but it just looked like a playful moment between two friends. But perhaps the timing wasn't right, and it certainly wasn't in the eyes of management. And apparently Vince was upset with this. And according to the rumor and innuendo, Titus was sent home from Tuesday night's tapings of SmackDown and was suspended for unprofessional conduct. The suspension was for 60 days, and that means no WrestleMania payday. But reportedly, it was almost much worse. Vince apparently had to be talked out of firing Titus O'Neil for this. And I remind you, Titus O'Neil has been a brand ambassador for the company. And for what it's worth, this is Black History Month. The situation pissed off one of Titus O'Neil's friends and Dave Bautista. He said that Vince McMahon and Titus should have been able to have a man-to-man conversation, not a suspension and a fine, and that fine aspect is worsened by taking WrestleMania away from him. Bautista also said that Titus should just quit because he didn't need to be there. He said Titus is an educated and talented guy who can make more money doing other things, and he's only there because he loves it. This was a big story at the time. You were there. What was your take behind the scenes?
Excuse me. I tell you what I think happened. Daniel Bryan is beloved by pretty much everybody that loves him, everybody that knows him. He is just one of those guys that endears himself to you as being a legitimate guy. And I don't know anybody that doesn't respect and speak highly of Daniel Bryan. I think the timing of him legitimately having to retire because of health issues was because you saw how it affected him backstage, and you saw how it affected the other talent who really cared about the guy. And I think it being such a somber, real moment that any other day it might not have been as bad, but when Titus grabbed Vince by the wrist as he was starting to exit, it caught him off guard, and he almost fell down. And I think that embarrassed him. Probably it embarrassed him more than anyone else looked at it and looked at it as, it being a comedic moment or something, but you just don't. I think in Vince's mind, it made him look bad because he almost fell, and it pissed him off right away. And I think it probably in his mind, that was a big moment in one of the talent's careers, because Daniel was retiring. And I'm thinking he probably thought to himself, this was just not a time to be goofing, and it got out of control like really quick and flamed up really quick. I don't think there was any ill tension. I just don't think that Titus was thinking properly when he did it. That's the only thing I can figure out, sorting through the facts.
Let's talk about another big story that happens at the time. Shane McMahon is coming back with the company, and Meltzer would write, until the day of the show, very few people were aware Shane McMahon was returning. The deal between Vince and Shane was legitimately struck about 4 weeks ago when Vince believed the original plan of Cena versus Undertaker wasn't going to happen. There have been a ton of key injuries in the past year, including Seth Rollins when he was the only heel getting any kind of focus, as well as the company favorite Randy Orton. But it's been said that when Cena went down, Vince was devastated because he had his heart set on legend versus legend to carry the big show. This led him to going way outside of the box for a deal amidst criticism that this WrestleMania was going to have the weakest lineup and least interest in years. The reality is, while the show would not have had the special thing to create record entrance, WrestleMania as a brand name is so big, almost like a Super Bowl or Final Four, it would significantly increase network subscriptions. Sorry guys, wearing my glasses today. Either way though, he's back now. He hit the panic button and Shane is back. Would you have guessed that Shane was going to show up in 2016? It caught a lot of people off guard.
Yeah, I mean, it was a surprise. Everybody had thought that Shane had moved on and was involved with some overseas stuff. It's always a pleasure to see Shane. I always liked Shane. Always got along with Shane. Matter of fact, as a trivia note, Tully and I had Shane's first match when they were having him referee some matches, just so that he learned the business top to bottom. We had his first match as a referee, so there's a little trivia there. Number one, WrestleMania will never, be sold. That show will never be sold on one match. It's just won't. One match will not draw a house these days. It's hard to draw a house in a live event with just a single main event and nothing underneath it. You have to have, WrestleMania has to have 7 or 8 matches that have value in order to sell that show, because people are coming from around the world to see it. And, when you sell 100,000 tickets, let's just say that's not based on one match. There's a lot of interest in a lot of matches. And, Shane walking back in the door immediately had star power. He had a following, I think, from day one. He's a McMahon. And, every time Stephanie would step into a role or Shane would step into a role or Vince would step into a role, it immediately got more important when they were on the show as performers and characters. And I think Shane walking back in the door, big plus.
A little note from the Observer about autograph signings really caught me off guard. He says, a note on WWE talent when it comes to autograph signings is that they are not allowed to do signings if there's a ring up for third parties, or at least that's the general rule. For instance, Shawn Michaels, who comes at a very high price, can still sign in conjunction with an indie show, but he can't be there once the ring is put up or be there when the show takes place. I'm fascinated by this. You were doing signings at this time. Was this a real rule?
I never heard that.
Seems weird.
I don't think WWE contract talent were allowed to do anything,
right,
unless WWE booked them and booked it. And it was never be in a independent show setting. I can't imagine that. Don't think that's a real thing.
Let's get to the show itself. Fastlane 2016. It was a mixed bag, man. It only got 50.7% thumbs up in the Observer from the readers there. 24.9% gave it a thumbs down and 24.4% gave it thumbs in the middle. You watched this show for the first time in 5 years. What do you think? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle?
Well, I just think, like I said earlier, it's just, we were jamming stuff together, trying to get a number, trying to get, buy rate. And, it just always felt like to me, it was just crammed in there. I'm not a fan. If you've got a big show, I love that one pay-per-view every 4 months, and man, build it huge. And if you totaled up the numbers of those 4 shows back when business was really popping, things were doing right. And then you totaled up, those years where we had, let's just say we had 14 pay-per-views. And I'm sure, some years we did. And you total up the same 2 numbers, they probably weren't that far apart. And just imagine all the expenses that you put into all those extra pay-per-views and all the sets of trans and all the plane tickets and all the hotel rooms and all those things that you were paying for that were added expense. It just seemed like to me that's one pay-per-view. Once you had the Rumble, Fastlane could have easily went away and it wouldn't have pissed anybody off.
Let's talk about the first match here. We've got Kalisto winning a 2 out of 3 falls match from Alberto de Rio in 15 minutes and 14 seconds. So Kalisto retains his U.S. title. It gets 3.25 stars. Listen, I love the idea of starting any pay-per-view with Kalisto. That's going to guarantee a hot start to your show. But 2 out of 3 falls, I don't know that I would have thought that would have opened the show, but I really dug this. I know Del Rio has been a controversial figure, but I thought this was a good match here. What do you think?
Well, Alberto could work that style, and he was bigger, and he was the heel. All the things were in place. You had the champion, babyface, which was Kalisto, and people did like him. I think starting a show with 2 out of 3 falls, that feels like to me a bit much. That would have probably been served a little later in the card, maybe third on the card, something like that. I always like opening up a big show with a couple of stars, good solid 12 minutes, so it's not too long, but it's long enough for you to sink your teeth into it. And, you know, 2 out of 3 falls might not fit right there, but as far as the two guys working together, they could work that Mexican style, which would, you know, had a certain appeal. It's like the European style. I love that stuff. But it was a very exciting way to flip, flop, and fly and get the audience off their butt.
The next match is all about the women's revolution. We've got Becky Lynch teaming with Sasha Banks to take on Tamina and Naomi. Becky and Sasha get the win in 9 minutes and 41 seconds. The storyline here is Lynch and Banks are sort of teasing that they're not getting along. Meltzer would say some of the stuff was sloppy, and he gave it 2.5 stars. Ultimately, Lynch uses the disarmor on Naomi, and Banks uses the bank statement on Tamina. It's a double submission. You know, still the coming out party for Becky Lynch and Sasha showing what she can do. I feel a little bad for Naomi here. I think sometimes she gets overlooked in this women's revolution, and you and I haven't ever really spent any time talking about Tamina. What'd you think of the match, and what can you tell us about Tamina?
Well, I mean, Tamina is very physical, and she is a very solid performer. I think she needed more ring time. Naomi went through some spurts of time when she really improved. I would, you know, I don't know if I was being the other town or whatever, but there would be a couple of 2 or 3 week periods that maybe I hadn't seen Naomi and the improvement she was making, but she went through some really, you know, really good learning curves during this time. But still, you got to look at Becky and Sasha, and they were 2 of the ones that, you know, to this day are just very special. They belong. They always belonged in this business. And I think it was just a question of the other 2 were a more polished team. They were used to working together more. I think Naomi was still green. And I think Tamina, who could be very, very physical, was still green too. And it was just a difference in the amount of experience that the 2 teams had. That's what you saw during this match.
The next match is for the Intercontinental Championship. It's Kevin Owens and Dolph Ziggler, 2 of our favorites here on the show. Kevin Owens is going to retain in 15 minutes and 10 seconds. Meltzer would say Ziggler braided his hair to look like Uriah Faber in a fight. The crowd was real hot for this. Ziggler is from Cleveland, but they're hot for Owens. Owens made constant smart-ass comments during the match, including telling Ziggler that he was more popular than Ziggler even in his hometown. Ziggler took a really hard whip into the turnbuckles. Owens is going to use a fisherman buster off the middle rope for a near fall. Both used some super kicks back and forth, and the finish saw Ziggler miss a super kick and Owens get the win with a power bomb. 3.25 stars. I love these 2 performers. I don't think Dolph's even capable of having a bad match. I think people sometimes sleep on Kevin Owens as a talent, but I thought this was fantastic, and the crowd really made it for me. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, the crowd was great. 14,000 people in Cleveland. That's damn good. That's a lot of folks. Dolph Ziggler has, to my knowledge, never had a bad match. And probably to this day has not had a bad match. I do think that this was a period where let's clean that up.
Sure.
Where Kevin Owens had not been pulled up that long to the main roster, had he? Do you know from your memory banks there, Conrad?
Yeah, he came up in 2015, so the year prior. So he's here, I don't know, about a year now.
Okay. And I said from day one when he debuted against Cena, you know, he should have won that match and he should have been used as a babyface, because from day one, and I'm sure through this match, they just like Kevin Owens.
Yes, they do.
Thought he did some crazy stuff, and he did. And he did some stuff that he probably shouldn't have been able to do. He's the bumblebee of the business. You know, bumblebees should not be able to fly as fast as they do and maneuver as good as they do. But he does, and he pulls off some unique stuff. He's very creative, and he was regarded, in my mind, what I saw every night is no matter what you did with him, he was a babyface. And Dolph, that being his hometown and all those things, kind of worked against each other a little bit if you look at it from that slant, but still, our audience are going to like who they like and cheer for who they want to cheer for. Doesn't matter whose hometown it is. Doesn't matter who the good guy is perceived to be and who the bad guy is. And I'm sure, which mattered more than anything, is they gave the audience a solid, big-time, entertaining match. And the champion won that night. So I don't think there were any mistakes made during that match.
Next up, a 6-man tag. And boy, you want to talk about a cast of characters. Check this out. On one side, it's Big Show teaming with Kane and Ryback. A lot of beef. And across the ring, Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, and Braun Strowman. They go 10.5 minutes. Meltzer would say the match was better than expected. And he would write, JBL compared Strowman to Bill Kazmaier and Jeep Swenson. I can see the Swenson comparison, but it's not flattering because Kazmaier and Swenson were two of the worst pro wrestlers ever. Then again, the finish saw Show throw Strowman out of the ring and then pick Harper up and throw him over the top rope onto Rowan and Strowman. Show gave Strowman a great spear on the floor. While in the ring, Ryback pinned Harper after the shell shock. 3 stars. Man, I'm kind of legitimately shocked when this happened at the time that the Wyatt family lost. Obviously, Ryback was super hot a few years prior to this, I guess back in 2012. But it just felt like they were setting this up for sure. The Wyatt family's going to win, but it doesn't happen. What'd you think of the match? And were you surprised the Wyatts didn't go over?
My God, that was a lot of beef, huh?
Yeah, it's a lot of dude in there.
When you were running down those names, that floored me. Yeah, I don't think, as long as it was done properly and each guy was featured properly during that match, I don't think there was a mistake as far as who won, because, there's no runts in the bunch. That's for sure. And, to his credit, Braun Strowman is a guy that got better and better and better, as he went along. He had some matches, single matches with Roman Reigns that were just incredible. And he had aptitude for this business. He was not just a big guy that, was just a big guy that was a former weightlifter or whatever. He has some aptitude for this business. Big Show was always a guy that, he was a real giant. And, when he came in healthy, he would give you some stuff that you couldn't believe a guy his size could do. And I've always been a big fan and a friend of Big Show's. And, he had a great career. I don't think people appreciated a guy that size and the things he did for other talent to get them over. Ryback certainly is no small guy. Rowan, Big Red, we called him, and buddy, he was frightening. He made me nervous just being in the room with him. And then, of course, there's Brody Lee, my buddy. Brother, if he was in a match, something good was going to happen every single time, and it didn't matter who else was in the match. He was just that good. So you had a nice cast of characters, but they all kind of had the same gimmick. Same strongman gimmick. So, it was probably one of those big guy matches. And apparently it went okay. It was certainly a lot of them to be in one match. It's usually better where you have a monster and then a mere mortal. So you have that conflict and you have that difference in gimmick. I think, I'm just sitting here, running those names back through my head. That might have been the damnedest conglomeration of monsters ever in a match.
Yeah. It's pretty remarkable when you think about that, how much talent is here. Of course, Redbeard, I believe, is still working some independent shots here and there. Braun Strowman's on the top of the mountain with WWE. Big Show's enjoyed some success even on Netflix and making the occasional appearance. Kane's the freaking mayor. Unfortunately, we lost Luke Harper, and Ryback seems like he's training for a comeback. He got himself in a little bit of a dispute recently with Mark Henry. Where do you stand on Ryback? I mean, he's a guy who was riddled with injuries, took some time off. Now he's rehabbing his body to come back. What do you think we'll see from him in the future?
Well, I have an opinion about people the way they treat me.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter what they've done, unless it's some crime against nature or children or women or something that's unforgivable. It's like, I always had no issues and a great working relationship with Ryback. And there were a lot of things that I would pull him aside and explain to him in advance, my feeling about what they were going to do with him. Now, let me say this. There was a point when the Feed Me More stuff started right away and they first started pushing him. He got over pretty good.
Yeah.
He was pretty hot at one time. And again, here's that line, they cut his water off, and I don't know why. But it was so sudden and it was such a turn. It just makes you wonder, there was a conversation somewhere that I wasn't privy to. Somewhere he picked up some heat with the wrong guy. That's the only thing I can figure happened, because the guy was selling merch, looked like $1 million. He was getting over, which is what you want. And he had that look that Vince loves. So that I couldn't figure out what the negatives were, but I never had an issue with him working on matches or anything. He was always very, very easy to work with. Don't know about his arguments lately. I don't try to get involved too deeply in what I read and believing, about half of what I hear, maybe not even that. It's just sorry to hear that, because I like both guys, but if he's getting himself ready back for another run, we'll see how that goes.
It's going to be interesting because I think he's got people fired up on social media, and that's part of the trick here is you got to make people love or hate you, and we'll see what's next for him.
Maybe he's smarter than we all think, right?
Well, I mean, I haven't talked to him, but it does feel like if you're trying to make a big splash and you're healthy and if you've been following his social media posts, it certainly looks like he's ready for prime time. And now all of a sudden there's a controversy. It's like, okay, well, let's see what happens. Let's talk about the next match here. This is the last Divas title match on pay-per-view. Of course, they're going to award the winner at WrestleMania the new women's championship. I guess technically the Divas title is on the line at WrestleMania. You know what I'm talking about, though. Here we go. It's Charlotte and Brie Bella. They get plenty of time here, 12 minutes and 26 seconds. At one point, Brie Bella is going to mock Charlotte by doing the strut. There's a funny story there, as when Reed Flair was in high school, he lost a match, and the kid who beat him did the strut. Reed then attacked the kid, and there was a big-time scene. Charlotte was cut on her nose. She put Bella in a triangle and kept slamming her on the mat. Brie did the Nikki Bella forearm for a near fall. The finish saw Brie hit the missile dropkick, and she started selling her left leg. She used Daniel Bryan kicks, and it should be noted she was wearing the furry stuff that Bryan wore on his boots, and the crowd was super into that last few minutes, although it was rough early. Charlotte tried a figure four, but Bella reversed it into the yes lock, turned it into a half crab. The crowd was at this point the hottest it had been the entire show. The story is that because of her earlier leg injury, she couldn't put all the pressure on the half crab. Charlotte kicks out and Bella's neck gets caught on the ropes. Charlotte then uses the figure eight for the submission, 2 3/4 stars. Pretty remarkable that the biggest reaction at this point is the ladies. And it shows you that the fans really are ready for this women's revolution. We just talked about how hot they were for Kevin Owens and Dolph Ziggler, but Meltzer thought they were even hotter for this. You and I have gushed over Nikki Bella here on the show about how she was underrated and a great in-ring performer, but now we're seeing her sister Brie in there. What did you think of this match with Charlotte and Brie and how hot the crowd was for it?
Well, Brie was good hand too. I think those girls were underrated. I really do. And I think the fact that, Brie doing some of Daniel's moves would endear her to the crowd, which helped. I think Charlotte was percolating and getting a little better each time, each outing. And again, she's a natural. I think the main thing is they probably took their time and told a great story with everything they were doing. They didn't rush anything, and they had enough time to tell that story. And if you go back, even though there were some really good female performers, now the business had started to evolve. It truly was a difference in the diva push of the girls and the women's division. It was two different things, and we were starting to see that come together. And they had a good, clean finish, with a good, clean story. And I just think it was starting to really, really percolate, and you saw what was to come, and it's just continued to get better on a performance level with the women. But I think that was a turning point.
Really good match, especially for the crowd heat. I want to mention Stupid Ass Stan, our producer here on the show, has told me that it turns out the title was on the line at Roadblock 2. Whew, a lot of pay-per-views here in this era. Let's talk about what we've got next. As a reminder, we just covered the Royal Rumble, and AJ Styles made his debut, and it was quite the debut. The crowd was ready for him, and they even just did a special on this on the network recently. So what's our follow-up effort? He's getting a singles match here with Chris Jericho, and he wins in 16 minutes and 22 seconds. Meltzer would say crowd was really into this one as well, with loud dueling chants. JBL tried to put this over as a huge star from Japan coming to WWE, saying it was like if somebody like Kobashi, Kawada, or Hansen or Inoki came in during their primes. Well, Hansen and Inoki actually did. At times they were slightly off, but the actual match layout and intensity were tremendous, and the crowd was super into it. One highlight was Styles doing a plancha to the floor and Jericho catching him with a drop kick. They're pulling out all the stops here, Arn. It's a very stiff match. They got 4 stars in the Observer. This is his type of match. You're more of an old school guy, but you certainly have an appreciation for the new school stuff. Hell of a debut here in singles competition on pay-per-view for AJ Styles. What'd you think?
Loved it. They were close enough in styles that they could cater to each other. Chris loves challenges, and I know at that time he was really hitting on all cylinders. He really understood, his positioning with the company and the storytelling end of it. And Chris would look at that, not who's winning, who's losing, which a lot of guys make that mistake. Well, why is he beating me? Bullshit. He took that on as a challenge to go out and literally have the best match of the night. And, there's that, us forgetting that there was that gap of time that AJ Styles was on top in TNA that no one ever addressed, obviously, for those reasons, that we know. But, making him a bigger star because he was the top guy in all those years at TNA, top guy in Japan. Right now he's top guy in WWE. But why you couldn't just say that, which they were no threat to, at that TNA being what I'm speaking about. There were no threat, so, hey, go ahead and say, hey, this guy dominated. It just makes his pedigree bigger. And I don't see anything wrong with that. Just saying he's a big star from Japan. I mean, the audience knows prior to that where he was and
right.
What he had done. And sometimes it's better just to quit. It's louder in the room to avoid a conversation than just having the conversation. And I think that was a good chance that you had, that you could have just made him even bigger.
Let's talk a little bit about the Styles Clash, because that's been his finishing maneuver going back to the very beginning of his TNA run. And he used it obviously in Ring of Honor and in Japan. and he uses it here, and Jericho kicks out. Meltzer would say, I was really surprised they did that this early in Styles' run. Styles then used the calf crusher for their submission. Jericho did a supercell job on that move, struggling and refusing to tap until finally tapping. Jericho got up and stared down Styles and teased attacking him. They both had their fists ready to throw, but Jericho offered his hand and Styles shook it. So it's a nice little post-match thing as well, but I wanted to ask about Styles Clash. This was discussed a lot once upon a time that the move was banned and WWE did not want him to do it. And I think Jericho even did an interview where he said, when AJ first came into WWE, Vince did not know him from a hole in the ground. And obviously I knew AJ Styles. I'd never touched him. I'd never been in the ring with him ever, but obviously knew his reputation and knew what he could do. And we really started gelling. The first match was okay. The second match is okay, but we started really coming together. The tag team match we had where I turned against him and the New Day was 5 stars. The WrestleMania match we had was great. And the one we had the next night, the 4-way with me versus Owens versus AJ versus Cesaro, was a tremendous match. And that's the one when I basically got the Styles Clash unbanned because it was banned. And I was like, I knew that Vince had heard that somebody got hurt by the move, but I also knew that he probably didn't even know what the move was. He just knew the name, the Styles Clash. So I pitched it to him as a cool move that AJ does where he drops you on your face. And we did it at WrestleMania. We did it a couple times. The first time I kicked out of it just so Vince could see it. And people were so mad at me. I'm helping get this move acclimated and unbanned. And the next month he's using it on the floor against Roman Reigns. So I'm interested in hearing your take on the Styles Clash. And as an agent, if you had heard the move was banned.
Well, I heard that one guy got hurt with it, but I think it was that guy's fault when it was reviewed exactly what happened.
There's been a couple moments over the years that went poorly. One was in Nashville with Ring of Honor, Roderick Strong, who you may know from NXT.
Yeah.
I think a lot of wrestlers instinctively are taught to tuck your head, and he went to tuck his head, but you're going to fall flat. So if your head is down, that's actually the opposite of what you would do on a Styles Clash. And I actually happened to be in the building the day that Roderick was hurt, and it was a scary scene. But technically, if you know how to take the move, and I'm certainly not piling on Roderick Strong. What the fuck do I know? I'm not a wrestler. But I just think instinctively, a lot of guys probably tuck their head because they're used to that on power bombs or whatever. Well, it works the opposite way here, and he was hurt. So I understand where the discussion comes from of, hey, this is a dangerous move. But when executed properly, I don't think AJ's ever hurt anybody with it. So I'm interested your take. Didn't mean to cut you off there. I just wanted to add some context to Roderick Strong.
Well, I'd have to see it to look at what might have went wrong.
Right.
And I can only compare it to things that happened today. I know a lot of guys try to make guys' finish look even bigger than what it is when it doesn't need it. It doesn't deserve it. I'll give you an example. Matt Hardy on his finish on the Twist of Fate is basically just like you twist into it. The guy lays out, hits on his stomach, easy peasy. It's not a dangerous move per se, but I see guys that try to elevate themselves and make it more of a downward motion other than a flat on their stomach motion, which is intended to do. It's like similar to a diamond cutter, similar to an RKO. It's a belly bomb. And the audience understands that. When guys try to make it bigger, there's a risk of getting hurt. That's one example. I would have to see what happened on the Roderick Strong thing to know, well, was he pushing too hard to make it a bigger bump? Did he not actually know how to do it? Was it a mistake on AJ? I don't know because it's not in front of me.
Sure.
I can't see it. I'm not a fan of anybody getting hurt.
Of course.
Because of recklessness. I hate recklessness in this business because 9 times out of 10 it could have been avoided.
Right.
But I bet you AJ Styles hit that move 1,000 times successfully.
Oh, sure.
So where to place the blame where, I don't know. I'm not a fan of kicking out on guys' finishes. either. And I think the Styles Clash, was not established already as a finish, which is the reason Jericho could do it and not do any damage. And he knew that. I mean, the guy just got here. We don't know what his finish is. That big forearm off the top, obviously, is his finish. Springboard forearm, and it looks the part, and it is a finish. So I'm not, no issues with that. And if Chris was trying to show Jericho or show Vince the move, totally believe that. I don't think you hurt AJ by kicking out of it because it wasn't established yet. Not with WWE, maybe other places.
But you had heard as an agent that a guy got hurt with it, and that's the reason we're not doing it. Were you surprised to see them actually use it in the match like this?
If I would have been, and I don't even know if I was privy to that conversation or that set of guidelines, but I would have been shocked. I would have been very shocked if it's a banned move, and for it to just suddenly happen would have shocked me, because I know the heat that would have gotten. That would have been viewed as just straight defying Vince's edict. And that never works.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Something else that didn't work. It's an Edge and Christian segment with the New Day. They're going to plug their new show on the WWE Network, and they're basically going to run down the whole roster. New Day join in on some of the fun too. They're going to make fun of the Ascension, the Usos, the Dudleys, and the League of Booty. Of course, Xavier Woods says the League of Nations were hot garbage, and of course they come out. So we've got three different factions here, I guess, if you count Edge and Christian as one. And Edge is even running down Del Rio saying, "Hey, I've been retired for 5 years and I've still done more than you have." It's an interesting segment, I guess, maybe teasing an Edge return, even though we didn't think at the time that was possible. Meltzer would be pretty critical of the segment, saying there were some cool and funny lines here, but the segment went too long. I know that there is a need for, I guess, what Bruce and Pat and Vince call a let me up match. Maybe instead of programming a match to do that, instead they do this comedy segment. I know they want to plug something on the network, but Meltzer thought it went a little long. What do you think about the segment and the placement of it here on the show?
Too busy trying to accomplish too many things.
Yeah.
Too many people standing around while one guy's talking or two guys are talking, kind of just standing around twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can expose, and I think you have to expose all your talent on TV, and they got to get on the big shows occasionally, but just to log jam a bunch of guys out there, everybody in the audience could feel that that's exactly what was happening. They were getting faces on television, getting exposure, and it was just too busy for me.
I agree. It probably would have worked better on Raw rather than here. Next up, it feels like a filler match. It's only 2 minutes and 17 seconds. And Meltzer says, even though it was short, it still managed to be the worst on the card. Curtis Axel pins R-Truth in 2:17. All the social outcasts are at ringside. Goldust comes out, trips Axel, throws Heath Slater into the barricade, and then throws Adam Rose into the ring. That distracts R-Truth, and Axel pins him with a schoolboy holding the trunks, and R-Truth is mad that Goldust has cost him the match. He gave it a dud rating. We haven't talked about Curtis Axel very much here on the show. The son of Mr. Perfect. A lot of people assumed he was going to be one of the chosen ones, especially when they did the stop and start with Paul Heyman as his manager. He has an Intercontinental title run, and people think he's going to do some big stuff. It doesn't quite happen. They tried again to do something with Social Outcasts, and they even had him and, the whole Mega Powers thing that he did with Damian Sandow, I think got great reactions, but he never really got a lot of momentum going again. Why do you think that is? I mean, this is a guy who, even when The Rock was wanting to come back, he wanted to work with Curtis Axel to work off some ring rust. So clearly his peers know, love, and respect him, but it doesn't feel like management saw much for him. What say you?
Well, that kid can work.
Yeah.
Under any circumstances, he can work. Now, what sounds bigger to you, Joe Henning or Curtis Axel?
I totally agree. I never understood that.
Why not let a guy, and that's the problem. In second generation wrestlers, when you have a dad or a granddad for that matter, in your third generation, and they have all achieved great things in this business, why not build on that? Day one, walking out the gate, this is Joe Henning, son of Mr. Perfect. And that's who he is, day one. You don't try to tell him he's somebody else with a different name. And that whole flimsy excuse of well, he's never going to be as good as his dad, so it's going to hurt him. Bullshit. If you know your dad, you know, it's like if my dad was John Wayne, man, and I'm walking in a cowboy movie, I'm immediately going to get some interest versus if I'm plus one of the other cowboys that got shot off the roof last week.
All right. You know? Yeah.
Let's say my dad is John Wayne.
Yeah.
I'm in a cowboy movie. Let's just see how I do. You're going to have a lot more of a jump start. You're going to have more interest. You're going to have more anything. And I think that was one of the mistakes because the guy had talent and he just did. But when you start him as someone else and you're always digging a hole and you let Heyman manage him for what had to be a very short time, right?
Yeah, just a hiccup.
It's almost like it's the audience in the audience mind. Well, Heyman gave up on the guy. The guy must not have all the things that looks like he has. But the guy was very talented, and you have to bring them in. When you have new talent, you have to bring them in and introduce them like stars. If the company doesn't look at them like they're a star, the audience is not going to look at them like they're a star. And I think that's the biggest mistake that was made with Joe.
Let's talk a little bit about the other social outcasts. Specifically, I want to talk about Bo Dallas. We know you're tight with Heath Slater, and we're glad to hear that he's an Impact, and hopefully he's all healed up and back in action real soon. Adam Rose is going another way. He looks like a totally different individual. But Bo Dallas, given his relationship with, you know, the office through his dad being an agent and his brother being one of the tippy top guys, and he was originally the guy in the family who got the big push down in NXT. I was sort of shocked to see that they didn't do more with Bo. Did Bo get a fair shake? It's hard for me to really understand what happened with Bo.
I think that gimmick that they put on him and coming down and running around the ring with the sign and all that stuff, that was just clutter around a guy that, you know, everybody was saying when he was down, what was he, 5 years? Was he down through the system before he came to the?
Yeah, he was the champ down there. And I mean, he had quite a run in NXT. And
very successful and was used really well. And the main thing was, I mean, he's a good looking kid, you know, good worker, good businessman, the whole thing. You know, he had all the attributes of a good young talent that was going to come on and do well. But when you start sticking gimmicks on guys just to be doing it, you know, to give creative something to do, you know, I think it was just, he just had some corny gimmicks. And, you know, other than it being stressed, you know, there was plenty of ways to bring him into the fold and make him more important. Let's just say, and at that time I pitched a deal where you brought him in with the Wyatts and you told him who he was. He was Bray Wyatt's brother and he was Mike Rotundo's son, and, you know, and do a deal where, let's just say that Mike came down during one of the Wyatt's matches and in his capacity as a producer was trying to break up a fight. And let's just say, you know, Big Red and Brody Lee, let's just say they dropped Mike. And for the first time you had Bray Wyatt, you know, who, other than join in what was going on with the other two Wyatts, he pulled them off and said, not him. And now you find out that he's the son of Mike Rotundo, because I don't think it was 100%. Everybody knew that. now you have the Wyatts back off, and you have Bo introduced as like the babyface other brother who he really is, and you put him in with that group, and you got all these monsters with these foot-long beards, and there you've got this babyface who is Bray Wyatt's legitimate brother, and he's standing over here. It just would open up some different avenues to give the kid a chance to get started, and in the mix with top talent to where you could have went anywhere with that. Just as an example. I know that's long-winded, and it was just something that was pitched, but it would have gave him a better launching pad than having him run around the ring with a, Bo Leave sign, I think was what was wrote on the sign. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's right. Bo Leave. And by the way, we're talking about a guy who graduated high school in 2008, probably May or June. And in November of the same year signed with WWE. So as we're talking now, he's 13 years with the company. But so was Curtis Axel. But here's the difference. Bo is only 30 years old, which is really remarkable when you think about it, how long he's been there, and he's only 30. He's probably 10 years away from his quote unquote wrestler prime. So he's got plenty of time left, to do some really cool stuff. And just based on what we saw him do in NXT, and my gosh, the family, the gene pool, I'm pulling for Bo. I'm hoping that we see some big stuff.
I'm with you on that.
Let's get to our main event. Roman Reigns is going to win a 3-way. Of course he is. To get the WWE title shot at WrestleMania, he defeats Dean Ambrose and Brock Lesnar. 16 minutes and 48 seconds. Meltzer loved it. He called it a super great match with great heat. Of course, the fans are booing Roman Reigns a lot here. Lesnar's throwing everyone around with German suplexes. Lesnar continues to destroy both guys early. He's even throwing Roman into the barricades. They pull out all the stops here. F5s, power bombs, going through announcers tables. And ultimately it's 4.5 stars. The finish would see Reigns spear Lesnar, but as Reigns goes for the pin, Lesnar catches him in a Kimura. Reigns stands up while being held in the move, but never broke it. Ambrose came back in and hit Lesnar with 5 hard chair shots to the back. Ambrose then nailed Reigns with 3 chair shots to the back, and he goes back to hit Lesnar with a chair until he rolls out of the ring. Reigns then spears Ambrose for the pin, and after the match, Triple H came out and he and Reigns had a stare down with the WrestleMania sign in the background. So now we know who our WrestleMania main event is. It's Roman Reigns challenging the WWE champion Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Triple H, in the main event. What'd you think of this match, man? They pulled out all the stops, crazy bumps and stuff I didn't think we would see Lesnar do, but he did. But he didn't take the pin. Roman's old pal Dean Ambrose did. What'd you think?
Well, I think it was a little bit predictable that you beat Dean.
Yeah.
I think in the process of that, though, if you look at the character that Dean Ambrose is right now, that guy manifested himself during that match. He was a guy that was getting creamed. He was getting his head cut off with a skill saw, putting his head back on and getting back in the fight.
Yeah.
He's a tough, rugged, won't stay down. You're not going to get him to quit character. And that's who he is now. And that's where his success is now. He's unpredictable. You don't know what he's going to do next. He don't know what he's going to do next. So there was a lot of character building there. Lesnar was Lesnar. He is that guy that you buy a ticket to see. He's a killing machine. And, the sad part is Roman was just stuck in that quagmire of being shoved too hard and pushed too hard. All the mistakes that he was viewed as making, which were not his fault, from rotten promos to suffering succotash.
Oh, yeah.
Come on. That one will live in infamy. A lot of mistakes made, pushing, Roman too hard. But, at the end of the day, I thought the audience got a hell of a 3-way main event. It was exciting, violent, great storytelling as far as it was 3 guys, which is hard to do now. Think about it. if you've got three guys in a match, normally it's two guys pounding on one.
Right.
This one felt like all three guys were fighting all three guys. And that's the way you want a triple threat to go. So at the end of the night, you had Hunter come down. I think, it's like Hunter was already Hunter. He's already established in the industry for eternity. I don't know if you had to have that at the end of it. Maybe you could have just, left it on the finish. Who knows? But it was, point being, Hunter was a baby face standing in that ring because he's iconic at this point.
Yes. Let's talk about the card itself. It's weird to me that we talked about at the start of this show that it only got 50% thumbs up. When it came to the best match poll, Reigns, Lesnar, and Ambrose in the main event got the most votes. The second most votes was AJ and Jericho. The third most was Owens and Ziggler. All excellent matches. The worst match, pretty overwhelmingly, was Curtis Axel and R-Truth, even though it's just 2 minutes. And I'm really shocked that it got mixed reviews. Meltzer says, the show got mixed reviews. I thought most of the matches were good, but the period from after the ending of Jericho and Styles until the main event, there was a long segment, including the New Day, Edge and Christian, and the League of Nations, and the dreadful R-Truth Curtis Axel match, and it took the show down. It's completely baffling, the idea of the cool down before the main event that takes people out of the show. It needed to be so long and even needed to be there at all. Almost no other promotion, whether it's an MMA or wrestling, tanks the period leading to the main event. On this show, they moved a very good Kalisto Del Rio match that was 2 out of 3 falls to the pre-show, and then they put Truth and Axel on right before the main event. The main event was fantastic, and most matches were good. I would have expected more things to build to WrestleMania, but they saved that until Raw. And I think he's probably got a point, just based on the way the show is structured. The pre-show match, as we mentioned, with Kalisto and Alberto de Rio, got 3.25 stars. Becky and Sasha's match got 2.5. Owens and Ziggler had a home run effort at 3.25. All the six mans, with all the beef we talked about, was a 3-star match. Charlotte and Brie got 2.75. The crowd was super hot for it. AJ and Jericho had a 4-star match. Curtis Axel and R-Truth were sort of there, got a dud rating. But the main event, man, 4.5 stars. There's a lot of really good wrestling on this, but fans still seem to think it was a mixed bag. Only half thought it was a thumbs up show. What do you make of that? Is it just the positioning?
Well, there's a way to put a placeholder match right before the main event. I don't think you had all that talking with all those guys out there, followed by a 2-minute match with no story really, right?
Yep.
So then you got to tack whatever time that was. If you look at it in that vein, that it was, there was no story with R-Truth and Goldust and all that stuff. It was just, that's exactly what it was, just to get them on TV. So if you add that time into all the talking that was done on the promo segment, that's a large chunk of time for nothing really that was built in the show. What if you would have put Charlotte and Brie in that spot?
Right.
Now you have a totally different match than the main event. It's still good quality storytelling. It's something I'm invested in. You get a clean finish. Everybody's happy. Now you can take a pause. Okay, now we're ready for our main event. That would have been an easy fix, I think.
Well, I hope that our easy fix is next week. We're throwing you guys the keys to the show. It's going to be hashtag Ask Arn Anything. Of course, we're going to continue our march to WrestleMania, and we'll continue to examine the rest of 2016. Probably going to take a look at a lot of 2011 stuff this year as well. But in between time, we're going to have lots of bonus content over at adfreeshows.com. As a reminder, you can get all of these shows early and ad-free, including the video over at adfreeshows.com in case you want to see Arn and I. Don't know why you would, but it's there. And as we said, every other week, it's hashtag Ask Arn Anything. If you have a question for Arn, go ask it right now on Twitter. It's at The Arn Show. And you can ask Arn pretty much anything you'd like. We've had discussions about cheeseburgers and the best way to drink a beer and your favorite Bob Armstrong memory and everything in between. It's no holds barred here every other week. It's hashtag Ask Arn Anything. And you can ask your question right now at The Arn Show on Twitter. Until next week, I am at Hey, it's Conrad. He is at The Arn Show, and we are out of time. We'll see you right here for hashtag Ask Arn Anything on Arn. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.